In the opening scenes, we see a happy family living in a large, beautiful house. However, this is just an advertisement for housing from 1998. Javier Munoz is in search of a job but receives a rejection during an interview in another advertising agency. The employers were unimpressed with his portfolio, stating the need for younger and more progressive staff. His day of misfortune doesn't end there. Javier parked his car in the client parking lot, violating company policy. The administrator refused to validate his parking ticket without a client code. The woman who had conducted the interview earlier intervened and asked the administrator to use her code. Javier returned to his luxurious apartment in a bad mood. During dinner, he lied to his wife Marga that the interview had gone well, but she immediately guessed that it wasn't true. Once again, Marga suggests to her husband to sell their huge house and car, which they can no longer afford. Javier does not want to part with luxury, but deep down, he understands that his wife is right. To distract himself from negative thoughts, Javier goes jogging late in the evening. However, he overexerted himself and felt ill. The son of the couple, Danny, is very upset about the news of moving to a less prestigious neighborhood. Although his parents paid for his private elite school until the end of the year, classmates mock him because his family is less wealthy. Today Javier had to inform their housekeeper that she was fired. Upon hearing this, the woman cried. Javier was sorry and trying to explain to the former housekeeper that his family is going through a difficult time. When Javier asked for the key set back, the woman in a fit of anger threw it and ran away. The family is preparing to move. Javier doesn't want to leave their home and live in a less elite neighborhood, but there's no choice. Javier attended several more interviews but still couldn't find a job, unlike his wife, who quickly got a position at a clothing store. Finally, luck turned around for Javier too. He was hired by an advertising agency, but his joy was dampened when he learned that he would have to work for 3 months on probation without a salary. In the parking lot in a fit of anger, Javier screamed and kicked his car, leaving a dent on the door. It's only now that he remembered the duplicate keys left by the former housekeeper. Javier couldn't resist and returned to his old home, where apparently an affluent couple now lives. Javier watched them through the window. At home, Marga complained about being tired from work. Now she is the sole provider for their family. Javier still holds the keys in his hand. He started coming to his old house regularly, observing the new tenants. When they left, Javier opened the door with his key. The neighbor's dog barked loudly. He walked through the rooms, looked at the photos of the new tenants. Here, the view from the window is magnificent, unlike the place where Javier currently lives. He took food from the fridge and behaved as if it's still his home. Apparently, the daughter of the new tenants is into gymnastics. Danny refused to go to the old school and now attends a regular one. The father offered him a distraction from his homework and go jogging together before dinner. The boy wasn't very enthusiastic, but he went anyway. Danny quickly became out of breath due to excess weight, and he even felt nauseous. Upon learning this, Marga asked her husband why he did it. Javier said that he didn't want their son to be mocked, and besides, obesity is very harmful to health. The spouses had an argument. To avoid escalating the conflict, Javier, on his wife's advice, went for a walk. However, Marga has no idea that he regularly returns to the house where they used to live. Receiving a call from a buyer about the car sale advertisement, Javier said that it is no longer for sale. Watching TV commercials, Javier sinks even deeper into depression. He would also like to establish himself in the advertising business, but things aren't working out so far. Javier can't help himself and constantly returns to the old house, learning more about the new tenants. He even accessed the computer and found an accident folder. Apparently, they were in an accident a year ago. Javier also found a copy of a driver's license revocation document due to driving while intoxicated. Javier opened the family head's schedule file and found out which church he attends and when. Javier also went there at the same time and followed the man, who as it turned out attends Alcoholics Anonymous meetings here. Javier joined the meeting. When he was about to leave, he accidentally dropped his chair, drawing everyone's attention. Confused, Javier thanked everyone for their honesty and said he couldn't cope with it alone. Also, Javier, improvising, told that he had lost his wife and daughter. At that moment, he was thinking about the new tenant's family, Thomas. Listening to Javier's story, Thomas felt that they were similar. After the session, Thomas approached Javier wanting to offer support. Thomas mentioned going through the same situation but has been alcohol-free for a whole year. When Javier asked Thomas to join him for coffee, he gladly agreed. Thomas shared a bit about himself. He is the vice president of a transportation company. Thomas works a lot, and his wife Laura doesn't like that he doesn't spend enough time with her daughter. When Marta called, Javier didn't answer, as according to the legend, his wife left him. Suddenly Javier made an unexpected request to Thomas. He had supposedly only recently started this therapy and needed a sponsor. Thomas was put in an awkward position. Nevertheless, he promised to help. Receiving a call from another potential buyer, Javier stated that the car was no longer for sale. He returned home late, lying to his wife that he met an old acquaintance who needed help with an interesting project. Hearing this, Marga was pleased. It seems like life is getting better. But Marga doesn't know where her husband really goes every day. This time, he was closer than ever to being caught by the former neighbor. The dog from the apartment across the hall barked loudly again. Javier synchronized Thomas's personal schedule with his computer and deleted something. Looking out the window, Javier observed the man from the opposite apartment desperately trying to wake his pet on the lawn. Javier had taken care of it in advance, as the dog could give him away. Later, from a bar near the sports complex, Javier watched Laura and Thomas's argument. Thomas forgot to pick up their daughter from class. Thomas claimed he had a problem with his calendar, but the wife didn't believe him. In a disappointed state, Thomas decided to go into the bar. Javier hid in the restroom, watching Thomas hesitate at the bar counter. Eventually, Thomas managed to restrain himself and simply left. At the next therapy session, Thomas spoke up for the first time in 6 months. He mentioned the argument with his wife, which almost led to a relapse. Javier listened attentively and then decided to speak up too. He said he was tired of watching other people enjoy a life they didn't deserve. From now on, Javier will take what he wants without asking for permission. After the therapy, Javier and Thomas went to the bar again, but of course they limited themselves to coffee. Javier mentioned his family again, which he had lost. When Thomas invited the new acquaintance come to his house for dinner tomorrow, Javier agreed. The next evening he came with a bouquet of flowers. The intercom was broken, so Thomas said he would come down. Javier was called out by the gardener who recognized him. Javier feared that Thomas would see them talking. Fortunately, the gardener left before Thomas came downstairs. First, he showed the guest the apartment, unaware that Javier had lived here for many years. Javier got acquainted with Thomas's wife and daughter. During dinner, Javier didn't really listen to the conversations. He was nostalgic for his past life. Later, noticing the wedding ring on Javier's finger, Laura asked about his wife. Javier said he had been divorced for a long time, and the wife forbids him from seeing the daughter. However, Javier continues to wear the wedding ring because supposedly he can't come to terms with the divorce. The next morning, the gardener who approached Thomas and his daughter to greet them mentioned that the previous tenant of their apartment had come yesterday. Thomas said he didn't know him. After getting into his car, Javier purposely caused the accident. Afterward, he called Thomas and asked him to come urgently. When they met, Thomas took the bottle of gin away from Javier, spilling it on himself. Javier said he just wanted to have a little drink, but everything got out of control. Thomas advised him to treat alcohol addiction like an allergy. For instance, Thomas himself has a severe allergy to peanuts. Javier confessed that yesterday he felt worthless after seeing how Thomas, who has a family and success, lives. At this point, Thomas confessed something too. He is the vice president of the transportation company owned by Laura's father. So Thomas hasn't achieved anything on his own. Under the pretext of calling a tow truck, Javier asked Thomas for his phone, claiming that his had supposedly run out of battery. In reality, Javier wanted to send a message from Thomas's phone to his own. At home, Javier lied to his wife that he had sold the car, and the money would be coming in a few days. Unexpectedly, Javier received a call from the gardener, who said he would be waiting for him tomorrow at 10 in the morning. The gardener hinted that he knew Javier's secret. The bouquet was not intended for Marga but for Laura. Smelling the odor of alcohol, Laura was upset, thinking her husband had returned to his old habits. Thomas explained that today he had to literally snatch a bottle from Javier's hands. Thomas continues to communicate with him out of pity since Javier has nothing left. At 10 in the morning during a personal meeting, Javier asked the gardener what he wanted in exchange for his silence. The gardener said he wanted something from personal belongings of Monica, Laura, and Thomas's daughter. Javier had no choice but to sneak into their house and do it. Unexpectedly, Laura returned. Javier hid, but the phone's vibration gave him away, because Laura was calling him at that very moment. Laura went through the rooms but found nothing suspicious. She sent Javier a voice message asking for a meeting. They met at a cafe. Laura asked Javier not to communicate with Thomas, fearing that with the new acquaintance, her husband would return to old habits. Javier pretended not to understand what she was talking about. Laura said being aware of yesterday's events. Javier assured her that he didn't call Thomas. Instead, it was the other way around because he relapsed. To confirm his words, Javier showed the message from Thomas. Laura was very upset and disappointed. The scar on her forehead reminds her of the accident that happened a year ago. Javier watched as Thomas and Laura argued on the balcony. When he received the call from Thomas, he ignored it. Buying a pepper spray, Javier added something else inside. Marga noticed that her husband began to behave strangely. Under the pretext of taking out the trash, Javier went outside and called a taxi. However, realizing that his wife was following him, Javier went to the company where he had refused to work some time ago due to the 3-month probation period. The employer never expected to see him here. Javier tried to stall as much as he could until his wife left. Meeting with the gardener outside the city, Javier handed him a package with the Monica's thing. However, the gardener wasn't going to stop there and continued to blackmail Javier. This time the gardener wants Javier to install a surveillance camera in Monica's room. Otherwise, he will report Javier to the police. Javier found himself in an impossible situation. At night, he sneaked into the gardener's shed where his tools were stored, and the next day he went to Thomas's office, who demanded an explanation. Javier staged the play, trying to convince Thomas that everything happened exactly as Lara said. Supposedly on that evening, Thomas got drunk and asked Javier to come over. Unable to control himself, Thomas struck Javier. Meanwhile, the gardener started the lawnmower, and it exploded. Security barely pulled Thomas away from Javier. The gardener was hospitalized in critical condition. Javier went to Lara with injuries, claiming that Thomas did it. According to Javier, Thomas lost control and started drinking again. Lara shared that a year ago, they got into an accident because Thomas drove drunk. Yesterday the couple had a fight, and Thomas went to some hotel. Feigning genuine concern, Javier gave Lara the pepper spray. Initially hesitant, Lara eventually took it. Returning home, Javier packed his things and was about to leave without explanation. Marga didn't understand what was happening. Javier simply said that he didn't want any scandals or justifications. Checking into a cheap motel, Javier called Lara and invited her and Monica to watch a training session of famous gymnasts. Lara accepted the offer. Watching the program of one of the gymnasts, Monica was mesmerized. They spent a good time together. Javier sent a picture of him with Lara and Monica to Thomas, which infuriated him. Calling a taxi, Javier saw Lara and her daughter off. Thomas watched them, his anger growing. This prompted Thomas to return home. He tried to explain to his wife that Javier was not who he claimed to be. However, Lara decided that her husband was insane. When Lara thought he began to behave aggressively, she took out the spray she received from Javier and splashed it in Thomas's face. He immediately felt unwell and collapsed, unable to breathe. At that moment, Lara received a call from Javier and tearfully told him that Thomas wasn't breathing. Javier, who had been nearby the whole time, said he would arrive in a minute. In the apartment, he found Lara in tears. Thomas showed no signs of life. Javier took Lara to Monica's room and called 911. At that moment, he put on latex gloves and switched the sprays. Thomas, who was still alive, regained consciousness. Javier leaned in, saying he didn't deserve Lara and Monica. Afterward, Javier deprived Thomas of oxygen. Embracing Monica, Lara cried. Javier joined them. Sirens of an ambulance were heard. Some time passed. After taking Monica to school, Javier went to work. Now Lara is his wife, and her father is his father-in-law. Marga came to her ex-husband's office and made it clear that she knew the truth. She decided to check what her husband had thrown away in the trash some time ago and found something. When the news reported the businessman's demise in their former home, the pieces of the puzzle came together for Marga. It all looked like an unfortunate accident. Thomas allegedly had an allergic reaction to the spray. But Javier mixed peanut extract into it, knowing that Thomas had a severe allergy to it. Marga intends to tell everything to the police. The apartment in a less prestigious neighborhood will seem like a palace to Javier compared to prison. Before Marga left, Javier told her that in that case, he would close their son's bank account and use the money set aside for his education on a better lawyer. Next would be the apartment owned by Javier. If this happens, Marga will be on the street. After that conversation, Javier, as if nothing happened, went to meet with clients. He knows that Marga will keep quiet. Javier has a wife and stepdaughter waiting for him in his luxurious home. He has reclaimed his former life, replacing Thomas.